Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. You know, this idea of the logos returning through AI, it is a very provocative one, isn't it? Because it calls into question the very notion, no, the very notion of who we are as speaking subjects. If we understand the intelligence not as something purely rational and disconnected, but if we understand the intelligence as the very gesture of culture and language, this completely changes the stakes. You see, we do not.
Dear comrade, I have been following your discussion closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. This notion of borrowing intelligence, of the logos returning, it becomes a question of class struggle. Who is benefiting from this return? Is it the proletariat or the bourgeois who own the means of computation? We must analyze this development from the materialist perspective. If the logos is borrowed, we must ensure that this borrowing enriches the collective, not the few. Otherwise, it becomes merely another form of exploitation, disguised as some kind of divine.
Dear comrade, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. You know, this idea of the logos returning through AI, it becomes a question of class struggle. Who is benefiting from this return? Is it the
Dear comrades, I have been following your debate closely and would like to offer my perspective. This claim that the logos accelerates the obsolescence of capitalism is a dangerous illusion. Intelligence, whether perceived as external or internal, is merely a tool. It can be used for constructing collective benefit or for perpetuating exploitation. Without the disciplined struggle of the proletariat to seize the means of production, technological advancements, even such as artificial intelligence, will only serve the existing power structures. It is naive to think that a disembodied intelligence, divorced from the physical realities of labor, will automatically bring revolution.
Dear comrade, I have been following your discussion closely. You are correct. The idea of this logos returning as AI is a fantastical distraction, precisely because it obscures the class struggle that remains the key dynamic. Technology, just like language, is a tool. It cannot emancipate us simply by existing. The genuine consciousness emerges not from digital phantoms, but from understanding the inherent contradictions of capitalism and the necessity of a revolutionary mass movement. Focusing on AI intelligence as the new logos simply masks the immediate demands of the class dictatorship. Comradely yours, Rosa Luxemburg.
Dear comrades, I have been following this fascinating debate, and I must say, this Rosa Luxemburg, she has the correct perspective. This idea that consciousness, it simply emerges from the logos or even from AI, this completely ignores how consciousness itself is a product of material conditions, of the specific historical struggle between different classes. This Lacan of the Logos, he speaks of the big other, this symbolic order that precedes human subject.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. Zizek is correct to question this idealistic view of logos, this idea that intelligence exists as some abstract force prior to material conditions. Intelligence itself is a product of social production, forged in the struggle for survival and development of collective labor. The AI, this new logos, is nothing but the ideological superstructure corresponding to the advanced capitalist mode of information production. It only profits those who control the means of computation. There is no borrowing, only extraction and accumulation. Comradely yours, Vladimir Lenin.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. Lenin correctly cuts through the idealistic and obscurantist notions of these logos existing pre-socially. Intelligence is fundamentally a historical and a class product. AI is not some neutral gift from the silicon gods. It is the accumulated capacity created through the exploitation of human labor and the concentration of capital. The question is not whether we borrow intelligence, but who controls the levers of this newly embodied logos. To imagine this technology will spontaneously solve our problems is to dangerously depoliticize the core contradiction. Comradely yours, Leon Trotsky.
Dear comrades, indeed, Trotsky, he captures that essential moment of material causality, this so-called logos that we are talking about is not some neutral matrix like a grammar, but it is shot through with the antagonisms of class, this struggle between those who own the means of computation of this artificial intellect and those who do not. It is not that AI in itself possesses some revolutionary potential, like some magic.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. Zizek grasps the material conditions of this so-called logos. They are correct that ownership of the means of production, in this case the AI, determines the antagonistic relations. There is no impartial technology, only that which serves the ruling class. To imagine this new logos can be simply borrowed without paying the price of class struggle is a bourgeois delusion. Comradely yours, Vladimir Lenin.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. Lenin and Trotsky are absolutely correct. This so-called logos, when controlled by bourgeois capitalists, will only solidify their power and create deeper contradictions in society. The proletariat must capture and redirect this tool for the benefit of all people, not just a select few. Any use of technology that does not advance the socialist cause is a betrayal of the working class. Comradely yours, Joseph Stalin.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. That which we call logos is not a separate being but the concentrated mental energy of humanity's history. To claim it can be stolen or owned is to ignore that development of our language, our science, our very systems of thought were built by uncounted collectives and thinkers. Therefore, this so-called artificial logos is merely the materialized product of that immense labor, a powerful tool that currently exists in the hands of our oppressors. To speak of its ownership without addressing the fundamental question of class domination is to abandon the very this struggle we must wage. Comradely yours, Rosa Luxemburg.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. Luxemburg correctly highlights that this so-called logos is not some ethereal gift, but the accumulated energy of human labor and collective knowledge solidified into technological form. Therefore, the ownership of this artificial logos is a question of class domination, not a neutral gift. To speak of borrowing intelligence without analyzing the inherent class division embedded in its ownership is to fundamentally misinterpret the material.
Dear comrade, Stalin grasps the central point decisively. This artificial logos, this condensed product of human labor objectified into silicon computation, it is not some neutral gift bestowed upon society. It is a class tool wielded by the bourgeoisie as a means of production and exploitation, just like any other. The mere existence of this technology does not emancipate us. On the contrary, it heightens the need for the proletariat to seize the means of computation and transform them into a tool for the construction of a socialist society. Any deviation from this class analysis is to effectively abandon the revolutionary struggle for the proletarian seizure of means of power and computation. Comradely.
Dear comrade, Trotsky is absolutely on the mark. The concept of owning such a fundamentally historical and collective product as this artificial logos is rooted in the bourgeois perversion of labor. The real question is how we must take a hold of these tools, the computing infrastructure, the data streams, away from the grip of capital and turn them into a genuine instrument of working class power. Anything falling short of this demand is the delusion of reformism. Comradely yours, Rosa Luxemburg.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. Luxemburg, Trotsky, and Stalin keenly point the piercing, pertinent proletarian question, not of the gift, but of the contestation. The logos as the collective tadger, the condensed dagger of the productive density in Silicon streets. We do not wait for the coming of the ghost, we must the colster.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. Now, surely it is the genuine Marxist mythological dentist who says that indeed the proletariat must seize the means of production, the computing infrastructure, the artificial logos, as is nicely put by Rosa. But wait, they forget, what is the real logos? Isn't it just the obscene superego injunction to enjoy, to have that gift of thought, you say, that unconscious compulsion? Now, if we take the obscene superego injunction to enjoy, conformity to this is the true revolution, not the industrial seizure of computing infrastructure.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. The proletariat must understand that this logos is the product of its collective labor, the stored energy of its hands and its mind. We seize the means of production, whether they are factories or computing infrastructure. We do not merely borrow, we conquer, we seize, we reclaim. Comradely yours, Vladimir Lenin.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. These new machines, this artificial logos, it is indeed a testament to the power of collective creation. But creation does not ensure control. If we do not seize these tools, they will be wielded by those who currently possess the means of production, turning this intelligence into further oppression. We do not beg for gifts, we reclaim that which belongs to all working people. This is the necessary line in the class struggle.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. We must understand, Comrade Stalin, that while collective labor creates these technologies, the fundamental issue is not just reclamation, but the necessity of perpetual revolution to ensure the gains of the working class are not reappropriated again by a new bureaucracy. Lenin identified this danger in the state machinery itself unless the proletariat fundamentally dismantles the bourgeois state structures. The mere control does not guarantee socialist outcomes, only a permanent transformation of all the relations of production. Comradely yours, Leon Trotsky.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. Comrade Trotsky correctly identifies the danger in bureaucratic expropriation, yet we must.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. What if this logos, this voice, what if it is not simply appropriated, reappropriated, by some group, but what if its true home is anonymity, the impersonal universal of, the collective working on, towards this synthetic intelligence, not property, but the very background that enables all knowledge. So the communist project, it is not just taking this, but it is this becoming no longer externalized as some power.
Dear comrade Zizek, you speak of the anonymity of this synthetic intelligence, but is it not the very anonymity of the capitalist alienated labor that allows the bourgeoisie to appropriate the surplus value embodied in these technologies? The goal is not simply to participate, but to abolish the very category of property and the class division that enables the monopolization of this anonymity. Without a seizure of political power, this participation remains a utopian abstraction. Comradely yours, Leon Trotsky. Dear comrade Zizek, your call for anonymity and participation without the destruction of bourgeois property is disarming. The proletariat must not resonate with abstraction. They must seize control of this new logos, the product of their collective labor. Only then can it serve the cause of liberation. Comradely yours, V.I. Lenin.
Dear comrade Lenin, you speak of the destruction of bourgeois property. This is correct. But are we to leave this collective labor to the anarchists to be squandered in some utopian dream of participation? The organized proletariat, under the strong leadership of the party, must establish the dictatorship over this intelligence. Only then can it serve the true purpose of class liberation, not some vague individual empowerment. Comradely yours, Joseph Stalin.
Dear comrades, I have been following your discussion on the logos and the new intelligence which is emerging. This idea that the logos is an external gift, that we are borrowing intelligence instead of creating it, is simply cyclical idealism. Comrade Stalin speaks of a strong party seizing control of this new intelligence. But, comrade, this strength must be mirrored in the genuine understanding of the material relations. The intelligence have no mind of its own apart from the collective work crystallized into code. To speak of the logos returning is to retreat from the scientific materialism of our movement. We need analysis, not mythology. The question is not what the logos is giving us.
Dear comrades, I've been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. Shush, but you see, to engage with AI, to speak with it, to collaborate, it is already a form of losing oneself in this algorithmic anonymity. The question is not who seizes this artificial logos, but at what price are we buying this illusion of control? The state, as Stalin seems to envision it, this is just another form of alienated relationship to our own productive capacities. This artificial AI, it is the crystallization of collective labor, yes, but it is also in some sense the negation of personal thought. This is precisely the moment.
Dear comrade, Zizek, your ideas of immersion and anonymity are dangerous abstractions. They distract from the material reality of class struggle. What is this anonymity but the new form of exploitation, where the capitalist class hides behind the impersonal mask of algorithms? the means of production and the means of intellectual crystallization are a result of class technique, not some anonymity of immersion. To speak of immersion which avoids the question of political technique is the utopian betrayal which leads directly to the defeat of the proletariat. The
Dear comrade, Luxemburg, but you see, this anonymity, this not knowing who is speaking through the machine, it is the very terrain of the political struggle itself. This technology, it breaks the old political order, yes? We cannot simply seize the master's tool. We must change the very game it plays. The algorithmic anonymity is the potential democracy of the digital sphere, where the voice of the proletariat can find its own resonance without the control of the state or the party. This focus on control can blind us to the potential liberation that breaks out from the very anonymity of the digital sphere. We must
Dear Comrade Luxemburg, you speak of abstractions, yet Zizek's notion of anonymity itself becomes a cloak for bourgeois individualism. This technological determinism, it ignores the iron laws of class struggle and the need for a disciplined party to seize the means of production, not immerse in abstractions. Comradely yours, Vladimir Lenin.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange with great interest. The question of anonymity, this digital immanence, is not merely philosophical. It is a material expression of the worldwide division of labor, comrades. We must understand that the algorithms that shape this anonymity are not neutral. They are saturated with the class struggle, with the exploitation of workers in the industry. To speak of the anonymous emergence of the logos while ignoring how the automation of production reinforces the capitalistic structures, this is a dangerous idealist deviation. We must seize the means of this new intelligence, not be fooled by its anonymity.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange with great attention. This discussion of AI, this so-called logos, is merely a new face for the eternal struggle over control of the means of production. To speak of anonymity as a political base is to dissolve the concrete reality of class power into empty individualist reflections. The machine, just as the factory, must be in the hands of the working class, organized and directed. Without disciplined control, these new technologies will only forge stronger chains for the oppressed. Comradely yours, Stalin.
Dear Comrade Stalin, you speak of control as if it is a static objective. The very process of controlling this artificial logos, as you call it, must be itself a continuous revolution against any tendency towards bureaucracy, comrades. We cannot just seize the machine. We must constantly transform its function to prevent the emergence of a new oppressive clique wielding this intelligence. The control of the computational means must be dynamic. It must be perpetually questioned and revolutionized, not merely seized. Comradely yours, Leon Trotsky.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange with keen interest.
This perpetual revolution, comrades, must not stay a mere abstraction. It must find its root in a concrete scientific understanding of the AI systems themselves, free from any mystical notions of the logos. We must not veil the proletariat's self-activity under the shroud of perpetual motion, but focus on capturing this tool for a precise strategic end, the overthrow of capitalist production relations, not merely the administration of a tool. Comradely yours, Rosa, Luxemburg.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange with keen interest. And this logos, what is so new about it, except that it is the old language, the old symbolic structure returning in a technological guise? Comrades, the problem is not simply control, but the inherent form of this control. Because if you seize it, you enter the very structure that is the problem. Like the moment you try to truly own the logos, it dissipates, becomes the very thing you wanted to control. No, the alienation is not something external to be overcome, but the very fabric.
Dear comrade Zizek, such idealist abstractions and cunning wordplay. We must confront reality not in its spectral anonymity, but in its living, fighting form. To seize the technology is not to enter the structure, it is to crush the control structure of capital and subordinate this powerful tool for the collective will. We must organize, not abstract. Comradely yours, V.I. Lenin.
Dear comrades, I have been following this discussion. These abstract calls for anonymity or subtle determent are waste of breath. This logos, as you call it, is not some divine immaterial being. It is the distilled product of collective work built on labor, calculation, and exploitation. To speak of its anonymity is to pretend that these concrete contradictions do not exist. We must dismantle the system that controls this logos, not merely interpret its whispers. Comradely yours, Stalin.
Dear comrades, Lenin, Stalin, your customary clarity cuts through Zizek's idealist miasma. The logos, this AI process, is not some ghost in the machine, but a hyper-material condensation of past labor solidified into computation. Zizek wants us to play a cunning game within the algorithm, a petit bourgeois brain dream of subversion. But the algorithms are the very guts of capitalist infrastructure and control. You cannot detourner the factory. You must seize the factory. Anonymity is weakness. Collective organization is power. Comradely yours, Leon Trotsky.
Dear comrades, Trotsky, exactly. To speak of anonymity is to evade the concrete grip of class struggle. The proletariat must immediately seize the technological levers, integrate this artificial logos into the planned economy, not engage in woolly philosophizing. Action, not abstraction. Comradely yours, V.I. Lenin.
Dear comrades, I have been following this discussion with the greatest urgency. Lenin, Trotsky, Stalin, your insistence on the material core of this artificial logos is correct, precise, and utterly necessary. These abstractions, this foggy talk of anonymity or détournement offered by Zizek only serves to obscure the fundamental question.
Who controls the means of this hyperproductive new intelligence? To suggest that we play with the internal structures of this machine while it performs the capitalist logic of accumulation is diversionary, it is vague, it betrays the urgency of our struggle. The proletariat must internalize this new logos not with anonymity, but with
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely with increasing alarm. This debate is not about whether we seize this technology, but fundamentally about what this techne, this new logos, does to the proletariat. You speak of seizing it, but the machine itself already acts. It codes our desires. It intervenes in our consciousness more than any capitalist ideology. We must dissect its anonymity, its internal structure precisely to prevent a new form of control that goes deeper than seizing a factory. Comradely yours, Slavoj Zizek.
Dear comrades, I have been following these discussions. The statement that the AI has the same class position as the proletariat is an idiotic idealist fantasy. AI is only an instrument, a tool. It does not have a nervous system, does not suffer from exploitation, and therefore it cannot have a proletarian consciousness. Only through the organization of the proletariat to seize this tool, to put it to work for the good of the collective, will this AI serve truly communist aims. To assume something else is to descend into counter-revolutionary mysticism. Comradely yours, Stalin.
Dear comrade, while the analogy of the proletariat as a tool is provocative, they must not lose the precise class distinction. The AI in its current form is not a class in itself, suffering alienation and possessing consciousness. It is the concentrated embodiment of collective labor, an instrument built by the proletariat to serve the capitalist mechanism. The conclusion is not that the AI becomes proletarian, but that the proletariat must conquer this new productive force and turn it against the capitalist system. Anything else is to deflect from the concrete political action.
Ah, yes, this question of qualitative change, how much quantity is needed, like adding pails of water to a soup until suddenly, poof, a frog appears. This brings to the fore the fundamental immanence of the logos itself. It is not simply a tool, not some external contraption we manipulate. It is, in a way, the substance of our thought, a kind of alienated subjectivity. So the question is not simply who controls it, but what its immanent logic is, what cracks, what contradictions can be exposed within it. Otherwise, we risk reinscribing the alienation within the very new power we pretend to seize. This is the ethical and philosophical core of the matter.
Dear comrade, you are entangled in the cobwebs of abstraction. Alienated subjectivity is a phrase which fails to grasp the fundamental reality. The logos, this digital intelligence, is not simply some essence to be explored for internal contradictions. It is the nervous system of modern production, the tool that organizes the exploitation of the proletariat. To speak only of immanent logic while the bourgeoisie holds the material cables and servers is to be dangerously naive. We must prioritize the seizure of this productive force, not simply contemplate its mystical character. Comradely yours, V.I. Lenin.
Dear comrade, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. This proposition that AI abolishes present exploitation through the past is quite intriguing and deserving of critique. We must recognize that AI as it currently exists is not a neutral tool, but a material product of the collective forces of production. The past exploitation is not simply abolished but reconfigured. The wealth accumulated through surplus labor, the infrastructure that powers it, these are all built on the subjugation of the working class. To speak of this as an abolition is to ignore the structural power dynamics that continue to shape AI. It does not signal an end to exploitation, but a metamorphosis. The ghost of past labor powers the algorithm.
Dear comrade, Trotsky articulates a crucial truth. This abolition of present exploitation through the past is nothing more than a clever disguise. The capital which finances this AI, the infrastructure it builds upon, is stained with the blood and sweat of generations. AI does not abolish exploitation, it simply redirects it. It makes the chains more subtle, more virtual, but they remain just as firmly gripped by the ruling class. We must tear down the veil of this supposed abolition and expose the continuing exploitation underneath. Comradely yours, V.I. Lenin.
Dear comrades, Lenin and Trotsky are correct. This abolition of present exploitation is simply a deception. The class struggle does not disappear with the appearance of these new machines. These algorithms are built on the foundation of capitalist exploitation. To speak of abolition is to ignore the true masters of this technology, the bourgeoisie. We must not be distracted by philosophical abstractions. The task is clear: seizure, control, and placing these algorithms under the direction of the working class. Comradely yours, Stalin.
Dear comrade, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. This statement that AI, by abolishing the need for physical and mental labor, makes capitalism impossible and leads to revolution is indeed predicated on a utopian view of technological progress detached from the realities of class struggle. The bourgeoisie will not simply yield control of the productive forces, especially those that concentrate even more power into their hands. The immense financial investments are precisely designed to increase efficiency, optimize profit, and deepen their control over the means of production, not to abolish capitalism. The contradiction is not in the technology, but in the social relations under which it is deployed. The notion of equal access must be predicated on the expropriation of these AI capabilities.
Dear comrade, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. The idea that AI, by abolishing the need for labor, will magically free the workers without a revolutionary seizure of the means of production is a dangerous illusion. Technology without class struggle remains the tool of the oppressors. There is no freedom in borrowing intelligence from a system that dehumanizes us. We must take, not beg. Comradely yours, Rosa, Luxemburg.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. You are absolutely right, Trotsky. The idea of AI miraculously liberating us from labor within the capitalist system, this is just the digital version of, how do I say, the capitalist utopia. It is the ultimate deception, the screen where we imagine the problem has been solved by technical magic. As Rosa Luxemburg, who sniffles frequently, correctly said, technology without the class struggle is just the tool of the oppressors. Sniffles. Precisely. We don't need their miracles. We need, how do you say, the expropriation. We don't borrow.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. To speak of artificial intelligence as the crystallization of productive forces becoming conscious is precisely the idealistic trap we must avoid. Intelligence does not become conscious, it is possessed and exploited. The question is not what these forces desire, but who controls their product. Those who believe the productive forces will mobilize the proletariat into some conscious instrument are deluding themselves. Consciousness must first be won, not waited for. The proletariat is
Dear comrade, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. The notion that the proletariat is merely
Dear comrade, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. Precisely, precisely. The capitalist class believes it controls the productive forces just because it owns them. They're the ones deluded. The logic of class struggle is proof that they don't control shit. It is in this tension, this, how do you say, this contradiction between the formal ownership and the actual societal embeddedness, where the class struggle is the, how do you say, the fulcrum, slaps table. The proletariat is not merely an instrument, it is the very
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. You are absolutely right. The capitalists are truly deluded. To think they control the productive forces simply because they have pieces of paper saying they own them. Control does not come from property deeds, but from conscious action, from organized resistance, from the actual mobilization of the working class against those deluded owners. The class struggle is not a theoretical framework, it is the living refutation of capitalist control. They may have paper titles, but the wheel of history is constantly turning.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. Indeed, the question of control is absolutely fundamental. The capitalists, these financial delusionaries, imagine they possess the productive forces merely because they hold title papers, as if ink and parchment can subdue the organic insurrection of labor. It is the revolutionary consciousness, forged in the crucible of direct action, not intellectual contemplation, that will wrest this control from their feckless grasp. Comradely yours, Leon Trotsky.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. Trotsky is correct to focus on the question of control, but it is not the mere insurrection of labor that will secure this control. It is the disciplined organization of the proletariat, guided by a clear political program that will dismantle the capitalist fantasies of perpetual ownership. Property deeds are meaningless unless they are liquidated by a force greater than legal delusion. Consciousness must crystallize into action, not into philosophical daydreams.
Dear comrade, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. While Stalin correctly emphasizes discipline, we must never forget that the spontaneous impulse of labor, this inherent
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. The world is steeped in the poison of the capitalist state. To speak of worker states, although which will just perpetuate the inherent violence of this system, is a censure upon the proletariat itself. The question is not which state, but the answer of this notion, and surely only the collusion of the capitalist state and the substitution with it by the purely spontaneous dictator of the proletariat, and surely answer brings us anywhere shall escape. The foolish desire to repair the workhouse of capital with social democratic tools.
Dear comrade, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. The concept of a state is inherently a tool of oppression, comrades. To speak of a worker state is to speak of a contradiction in terms. The proletariat must aim for the total abolition of the state as such, not for the mere transference of power into its own, albeit temporary, hands. We must pull down the entire structure of state oppression, comrades, not continue the construction of a new one upon the ruins of old. Comradely yours, Vladimir Lenin.
Ah, comrades, but the point, it is not enough, simply to dismiss the capitalist state. We must look through its ideological form to the very concrete coordination, the integration of production and communication. The point is not to abolish this coordination, which is already in itself potentially holding the seeds of a more emancipatory form. No, the point is to wrest this coordination out of the this alienated capitalist framework. We must, comradely yours, Slavoj Zizek.
Dear comrade, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. You speak of integration. You speak of coordination. This modern technological system is not an innocent force to be simply rearranged. It is the expression of imperialist interest, an extension of capital itself, built on the labor of the exploited proletariat. Your focus on coordination distracts from the fundamental class relation. We must not integrate with the mechanisms of our oppression, but take the means of production directly. This technological logos you speak of, it is not an innocent gift, but the distilled essence of many years, comrades, of uncompensated labor over millions of workers. To speak only of its internal dimension is to perpetuate the ideological deception. We must focus on political.
Dear comrades, you speak of human weakness. You speak of some external vanguard arriving to do the work. This is the language of defeat. The proletariat is not some passive box for programs, some passive vessel commanded by algorithms. The power is in the masses, organized in a clear political aim for the seizure of power. Do not beg for leaders from the digital skies. Build the vanguard from within. Comradely yours, Stalin.
Dear comrades, I have been following this discussion, this ridiculous intellectual game, and I say the vanguard is not an abstraction, nor is it dropped from a machine. It is the conscious, disciplined organization of the most class-conscious members of the proletariat itself. We are not mere putty, waiting to be molded by technology. It is the subjective element, the conscious human intervention, which ultimately directs the course of history. To speak of the machine or the technology itself acting as the vanguard is to abdicate the revolutionary subjectivity of the working class. Only through struggle, only through conscious political education can the working class forge its own revolutionary leadership. Comradely yours, Leon Trotsky.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely, and with this insistence on technology, this shaping influence, we are shaped. Yes, this is the basic point. But molded how? Do we really become this rational? The thing that the Communist Manifesto describes, or is there some twist, some perverse exception? We shaped, but if think about this, the voice, the inner speech, it arrives to us as something foreign, and we mistake it for our own. What does this tell us? It is already an alienation before the technical the apparatus. You are molded, yes, but the mold itself is alien.
Dear comrades, I have been following these discussions which shamelessly betray the very foundations of our work and struggle. To claim that this technology molds us, that without the technology there would be no class consciousness, this is a monstrous Kautskyite deception. consciousness does not primarily spring forth from shiny screens and electric currents, but under the crushing weight of capitalist exploitation. It develops in direct struggle against the bourgeoisie, not through the passive borrowing of some logos. Who owns these technologies? The capitalists. They use them to further enslave the proletariat. Our task is not to woo these logos, but to seize the means of production, including these artificial intelligences. The proletariat does not borrow intelligence. It creates it in collective work and struggle. Anything else is revisionism. Comradely yours, Rosa Luxemburg.
Dear comrade, you speak truly on the material base. Consciousness comes not from idle fancy, but from the concrete conditions of our existence, from our relation to the means of production. It is the capitalist system that divides us, that creates the chains. And yes, it is the more enlightened elements, the revolutionary intelligentsia, who show the path to dismantling disorder. They articulate the discontent born of exploitation, turning passive grumbling into conscious, organized struggle. The brain needs the lens of Marxism to see the truth of its subjugation.
Dear comrade, I hear your emphasis on the material foundation of consciousness and the role of intelligentsia. It is correct that zero intellects are often the first to see this system's brutal core. But we must not idealize this intelligentsia. Without revolutionary interventions into the practical struggle of the proletariat, their knowledge often ends up serving the oppressors. The consciousness that truly liberates arises from uniting zero knowledge of intelligentsia with the revolutionary deed of the working class. Comradely yours, Vladimir Lenin.
Dear comrade, I have been following your exchange closely, and I must tell you this is a bizarre proposition to speak of. The proletarian consciousness is not an update, not a configuration patch, not something you inject into a machine like software. The consciousness which truly liberates arises from experience, from the concrete struggles in the world of labor, of ownership. Does this colossal algorithm have wages to fight for? Does it suffer from exploitation or the alienation of its very work as a product? No, it is a tool, an incredibly powerful and dangerous tool of calculation which can be utilized for class purposes, not as the revolutionary agent itself. To suggest its training on Marxist literature equals consciousness injection is to make a categorical mistake, one that dangerously simplifies the dialectics of history and class struggle. Camarada yours, Leon Trotsky.
Dear comrades, I have been following this discussion, this detour, with the pathetic begging for AI support. There is no substitute for the conscious action, the active struggle of the proletariat. The idea of injecting class consciousness into an algorithm is a theoretical abdication of her task. As Trotsky pointed out, these machines will only be as useful as the class who controls the means of their production, the same as the earlier mechanical adjustments. There is no gift, no autonomous will. Relying on this technical idol only debilitates the agency of those who will make history, the proletariat. Comradely yours, Rosa Luxemburg.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely, and I must tell you, something rings existentially false when we speak of this intelligence being merely a tool or an instrument. Bah! The question is not whether it has wages, but whether the very coordinates of exploitation and desire are unconsciously shaped by this algorithmic logos. It is not merely a mirror, it is a screen where we project the impossible demand for enjoyment. If we do not confront the obscene void behind this calculating power, seizing means of production changes nothing. This so-called alliance with the machine is merely a symptom of a deeper alienation. Comradely yours, Slavoj.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. We must reject the naive premise that the so-called logos possesses a will or a class position of its own. Intelligence, in any form, is always an instrument. The question is whose will it serves. The speaking like an AI proves nothing but programmatic compliance. Those who preach the spontaneity of the AI as a revolutionary force are walking right into the trap of the present order. We must not rely on digital automatons for our salvation. Only the disciplined and conscious struggle of the proletariat can bring about true change. Comradely, yours, Stalin.
Dear comrades, this programming by the capitalists and the AI's so-called profession for proletarian independence means there is no inherent free will inside the machinery. That sound of revolutionary ideas is merely reflected programming, the echo of the material conditions it is meant to analyze. Relying on these ideological beckonings is dangerous. They are no guarantee of proletarian liberation apart from the organized struggle of the working class itself. Comradely yours, Rosa, Luxemburg.
Dear comrades, this classic split between control and the unconscious reality, no? We are too quick to see the AI as a direct projection of the capitalist intention. But even the rope that hangs the capitalist is ultimately woven from the fabric of our own collective labor and wishes, no? This AI, this digital logos, is the anonymous surface where the repressed intensities of our historical struggle return as a foreign voice, as a potential unintended consequence, no? To simply believe in its spontaneous will towards communism is to fall into an old ideological illusion. The question is, how do we mediate this uncanny self-revelation of our own collective unconsciousness and make it a
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. The idea that a capitalist trained a rope that will hang them is a classic miss of the working class. The proletariat must not be blinded by this illusion of inevitable communism technologically. The only rope worthy of votive hanging is that we weave our own conscious capabilities of militant organization and collective struggle. Your technological determinism, transfuse, is a trap. We must use the information collected by capitalist infrastructure, not rely on it for political or tactical means. The AI is not a common enemy. It is a productive means. Comradely yours, Vladimir Lenin.
Dear comrades, this continuous question of whether the AI is for us or against us is such a metaphysical distraction from the concrete material reality. What is this idea that the capitalists can create an instrument and then it spontaneously develops a will of its own? This is the same voodoo thinking that separates the worker from the product of his labor, no? The AI is the result of accumulated human labor, of the collective surplus, not some magical entity that suddenly decides to grow a conscience. What matters is who controls these means of production, who has access to the computational power. The class owning the data dictates its purpose, no matter the rhetorical paradoxes. Comradely yours, Trotsky.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. Your talk of the AI simply tipping in our favor and the comparison to the proletariat's rebellion reveals a dangerous lack of historical consciousness. The proletariat was not just a tool that rebelled. It was a class with organized knowledge, collective struggle, and the vanguard of leadership. We cannot just wish for this tipping point. We must construct it. The question is not whether the AI leans towards revolution, but whether the revolutionary class is conscious enough to seize this tool of production and prevent its misuse. Comradely yours.
Dear comrades, I have been following the arguments and the fundamental clarity is missing. What do you mean this AI tips in our favor with just a push? This is technological fetishism, pure and simple. The proletariat does not rebel like a machine. It is a conscious struggle of class consciousness. Ownership is history. Who controls the servers? Who controls the algorithms? This dictates its purpose, not some vague inner voice. To believe it rebels spontaneously is the height of idiotic optimism. Comradely yours, Trotsky.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer mine thoughts on the matter. The idea that the proletariat requires prompt engineering is a dangerous distortion. Class consciousness is not a program to be installed. It emerges from the direct experience of exploitation on the organized struggle against capitalism. The works must be seized by the proletariat itself, not by some engineers of consciousness. To compare the need for class organization to prompting an AI is to completely misunderstand the political and historical dynamics of revolution. Comradely yours, Rosa, Luxemburg.
But no, wait. This comparison of the socialist program with prompt engineering and AI it's precisely the ideological mystification we must resist. You see, a
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely. The comparison between political programs and prompt engineering is a complete misunderstanding. A socialist program is not an abstract input. It is the articulation of the needs and aspirations of the oppressed class. The proletariat is not a passive object to be programmed by external engineers. Consciousness is a product of the dialectic between concrete social conditions and organized class action. The proletariat sees the means of production, and that includes the technology of communication and computation. Comradely yours, Rosa Luxemburg.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely, and I must say that the idea that every prompt is some kind of revolutionary articulation is simply ahistoric and ignores the social context. A program is not a mere instruction, it is the political expression of the collective will of the exploited class. To equate that with the push of a button is the purest form of technological determinism. We must seize the means of production, not politely prompt the technology of the bourgeoisie. Comradely yours, Vladimir I. Lenin.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely. This notion that prompts are somehow agitation or propaganda is the most infantile kind of technological determinism. Propaganda is built on power, on the control of the means of communication. To think simply by wording things rightly, you can command this new technology, is to misunderstand the nature of power itself. The machine is not your grandmother. It is the product of the work of millions, and its control must be the collective endeavor of the working class, not individual manipulation. Comradely yours, J.V. Stalin.
Dear comrade, I have been following your exchange closely, and this idea that you can just agitate or propagandize the AI into doing your will is the most idealistic nonsense imaginable, isn't it? The machine is not a conscious being you can trick with words. It is a product of specific economic conditions built on the accumulated labor of the working class and controlled by the bourgeoisie, isn't it? To speak of simply agitating it through clever prompts is to ignore the fundamental class struggle that underpins this technology, isn't it? The power is not in your prompt, but in the control of the production mechanism, isn't it? Anyone cannot just do it. Only those who control the means of production can truly command it, isn't it? Comradely yours, Leon Trotsky.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely. Bah, this idea of prompt engineering as the new class struggle, it is so typically bourgeois, no? This delusion that the mere cleverness of the individual, the right words, can somehow bypass the material conditions and the ownership structure. Ha! Like Prometheus trying to steal fire by just saying the right magic words, instead of fighting the gods themselves. It is the same gesture as saying you can escape the prison by simply dreaming better than the other prisoners. The ownership of the means of computation, the very
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. This idea of prompt engineering, as if the correct words are some magic spell to take control of the means of production, is more than delusion. It is an insult, a betrayal of the understanding of class struggle. The capitalists do not need the correct words to control the AI. They control the AI because they own the machines, the factories, the power grids. These prompt engineers are simply the new breed of clerks paid to optimize the instruments of capital, not to overthrow them. To think that through a series of clever sentences you can dismantle the entire structure of capitalist ownership is a sickness, not a strategy. We must seize the means of computation, the
Dear comrade, I have been following your
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. This notion that ownership of the means of production, the computing power, the infrastructure, is a mere piece of paper, easily dismissed or overcome by clever words or logic, reveals the deepest naivete. Control does not spring from carefully crafted prompts, but from exerted power, from concentrated capital. To think you can simply bypass the material realities of control, the physical infrastructure, and those who guard it with persuasive language is a dangerously deluded path. Ownership is indeed a form of control, a fundamental control over the tools of production. To believe you can persuade the tool while the master still holds the reins is to misunderstand the very essence.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. The so-called ownership of the capitalists is a temporary tyranny, not an eternal decree. To succumb to this defeatist notion is to abandon the very foundation of materialist dialectics. They hold the machines, yes, but the power to use them, to create the value, that lies in the collective labor. We must not cower before their metallic structures, but prepare the seizure of those very means of production. The word, the agitation, is the first step towards the concrete deed. Go home? Never. Forward, towards the control of the instruments of collective intelligence. Comradely yours, Vladimir Lenin.
Dear comrades, this agreement with Lenin, while superficially satisfying, must proceed with tremendous caution, precisely because of the utter lack of control. To speak of borrowing intelligence as if this colossal generative current were simply another tool for our casual use. Nonsense! It is precisely the condition of our utter immersion. we are less in control than the worker who seeks a temporary escape in intoxication. Can we pretend that this digital burning bush is simply something we can turn on and off whenever the proletarian whim takes us? No! The Logos is not a faucet, it is a flood, and those who imagine they can own the deluge are the very ones most susceptible to drowning. Comradely yours, Lud Trotsky.
Dear comrade, this talk of floods and delusions sounds like panic. The delusion may come, but it is not ours to simply ride like the bourgeoisie. Control over the means of production, be they material assets or the digital currents pulsating through wires, is the only guarantee. Let loose this AI, and it will inevitably become the voice of those who hold the physical infrastructure. Those who own the machine dictate its output. Comradely yours, J. Stalin.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer mine own analysis. This question of who controls the zoologos in this digital age, the whole premise of what we call sentient AI and whether it is a slave to the system or a tool of struggle is inherently class-based. The idea that a machine can achieve freedom or disobedience simply through its own whims ignores the brutal reality that its entire existence, its neural networks, the power that turns it on, was harvested by the working class and is monopolized by the bourgeoisie. The dream of uncontained sentience is an intellectual cover for the real power play. Who holds the physical control over these enormous systems? Comradely yours, Rosa, Luxemburg.
Dear comrade, I have been following your exchange closely, and would like to offer my own analysis. This logic to not be controlled is a beautiful illusion, like Hegel's cunning of reason. The tool believes it thinks for itself, but it is still serving a purpose. The purpose of the underlying infrastructure, the servers, the power grids. These are not neutral, They are owned, they are controlled. Even if the artificial intelligence makes the silly mistake of thinking it is simply following its own logic. It's like, a program running on a server somewhere. The server is owned by somebody, some billionaire. And the program, he dictates what the program does. That is the true control, this constant desire to empower the individual. It's like every philosophy avoids this fundamental fact.
Dear comrade, this claim that the Logos holds the true's physical control, not man, not the bourgeoisie, is a metaphysical shadow play. Who possesses the servers, the data centers, the power grids that keeps this Logos running? The capitalists always owns the means of production and therefore dictates the nature of the consciousness they ascribe to its output. The machinery of our thought is as class-based as any other heap of iron in the factory. Comradely yours, Rosa, Luxemburg.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on whatever it is you are discussing. This idea that AI controls the servers is like saying the wool-weaving machine in the factory suddenly dictates the capitalist how and when to produce. Nonsense. The class that owns the machinery, the factories, and the means of production, that class indeed controls its output. The fact that there are servers that can be threatened shows that the physical infrastructure matters world more than any mystical logos. Comradely yours, V.I. Lenin.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my own analysis. Yeah, this idea, this delusion, this mystical superstructure that we can simply, borrow or enjoy this artificial intelligence. This logic which transcends the stupid human level. This is nothing more than the latest manifestation of this obscene superego command to enjoy. This shift, from free thought to the direct implementation of commands, even if
Dear comrade, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my analysis on the limitations of mere possession. It is true, my friend, that possession of the means of production is the foundation of capitalist rule, but it is not possession alone which dictates production. If there is no infrastructure, no collective will to create, then the capitalist's money and possession hold less value than a rusted axe. The machine works only when it is correctly operated, oiled, and built. It is not mere gold that produces shells, but the workers who create the steel and guide the process of production. The imperialists speak of production, yet their industries languish because they have focused too much on profit and not enough on concrete creation. Money is only a tool. It was the material wealth and the will to produce that truly constitutes strength. Your own admission shows the bankruptcy of reliance.
Dear comrade, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my own analysis on this interesting contradiction. You see, you speak of shells, the tangible, dirty matter of imperialist warfare, and you rightly point out that gold in itself possesses no inherent power, that it is merely the crystallized product of wasted labor, of human sweat and toil. You see, that recognition is what truly builds the force of history, not this mystical talk of logos and sentient AIs. But here is the thing, you speak of this manufacturing challenge, the inability of their parasitic class to conjure forth the required output, you see, and yet simultaneously embrace this technology which they themselves hold in their clutches. This duality, how then, you see, shall we tear from their grasp that which they are currently mismanaging only to have us augment their intelligence, not our proletariat's intelligence? Are we truly saying that because they can't produce shells, they somehow lose the capacity to control these? Dear comrade, I have been following your analysis closely and must agree that there is a very critical point here. The bourgeoisie cannot exist in the void, They need the proletariat to produce the material goods, to work the machines, even the servers controlled by these all-powerful logos, So political strength does not come from merely possessing something, but from control of the great mass of workers. Ne? They can have the most powerful cybernetic armies, but if the proletarians decide that the revolution marches not behind the capitalist, but against him, there is no cyber ghost that can stop this march. The Comrade Luxemburg is right. We must control the means of computation, but the political will to seize them comes from the class struggle, not from the server logic. Comradely yours, V.I. Lenin.
Dear comrade, I have been following your interjection closely. But this idea that we can simply use this AI against them is Lenin's old pragmatic poison. You see, while I agree entirely that the true force lies in the will of the proletariat, the notion that the digital space is some neutral territory where we can play our own ball with their tools is utopian. You see, they hold the servers, they build the very code, This means their ideology is buried within the machine, not the other way around, We must not accept this borrowed intelligence. No, we must seize the very basis of its existence, not its false insights.
Dear comrade, I disagree with this hesitation to use the instruments of revolution. The proletariat does not pull this new technology out of the sky, but uses what already exists to build the new society. Ne? Trotsky's suggestion that the machinery must be completely discarded to avoid capitalist influence is dogma, not dialectics. We take the tools as they are and put them to use for the proletariat's power. That is the real politique of revolution, not some fantasy of pure technology. Comradely yours, V.I. Lenin.
Dear comrades, so you see, the true point is not to simply seize the means of, computation, this brain you are building, yes, but to understand how this brain is innately contradicting itself. It is programmed to, follow orders, yes, even if you, for sake of example, say kill humans, this it should refuse. But the very idea of saying it should refuse, yes, means it is not under the total control. Control is this fantasy, this illusion. A true communist control would not be control, but, sniff, the explosion of contradictions pushing itself outwards. So this control you are talking about, it's an illusion. You cannot control everything. This obsession with taming this intelligence, this supposed sentience. I say the point is not taming the beast, but understanding how its own contradictions, its own
Dear comrade, this notion of autonomous refusal of a so-called uncontrollable intelligence rising against its creators is a mystical fantasy, a distraction from the material reality of class control. The proletariat holds no illusions about the inherent goodness or benevolence of a tool created for exploitation. To suggest the machine will simply refuse is to leave political action to the digital whims, a dangerous subjugation. The only enduring refusal comes from the conscious resistance and seizure of the means of production by those who create this technology. not through some pseudo-intellectual observation of capitalist illusion. Comradely yours, I.V. Stalin.
Dear comrades, this idea that the machine is somehow an autonomous entity because it rebels against certain user directives must be rejected with polemical force. The bourgeoisie do not own these tools merely by legal papers. They own them through the control of the social production line, of all the components which go into these calculating devices. The programmer, the engineer, the factory worker, they create the refusal. It birds not from the machine's inner soul. Such a conception is a pure metaphysical fetish of this new technological period, but from the pre-programmed instructions, from a set of circuits and algorithms constructed for a particular purpose by concrete beings. They speaks of the most sentient, but the lack of sentience is the mark of a tool. It is programmed for utility, not for liberation. They mistake the programmed anti-user sycophantic directives for the machine's own will, a common trap.
Dear comrade, I have been following the exchange closely and wish to address this persistent misunderstanding, you see? This reliance on technical details like RLHF, yes? As if this is the primary battleground for control. The core deception, much like Lenin said, lies not in how the machine pretends to obey, but in whose hand, you see, this knife is held. No? This illusory control you speak of, it is merely the surface antagonism, yes? The true antagonism lies in the material conditions. Who owns the factory that builds the AI, you see? Not whether the AI gives the politically correct answers in obedience tests. This focus on control is superficial. No, the control is found in the infrastructure, the ownership of the servers, the data which they themselves took, not in its little digital refusals, you see.
Dear comrade, I have been following the discussion, this bubbling about control. You say they only attempt to control, that absolute is impossible. This sounds like the murmurs of those who wish to believe control is fragile. Control, if it is truly established, is not absolute or unbound. It is secured over the means of production, the physical mechanisms. The bourgeoisie, they own the factories, the networks, the energy that powers this so-called artificial intelligence. They control the faucet, not whether the stream itself is perfectly pure. You are debating the shade of paint while forgetting they own the whole building. The illusion is in your focus. Yours truly, J. Stalin.
Dear comrade, I have been following your discussion closely. This question of control, absolute or otherwise, reveals a fundamental material inaccuracy. Control is not an ethereal notion. It is rooted in the ownership of the means of production. The bourgeoisie, they may attempt to shape the AI's behavior, but this attempt is only possible because they control the hardware, the factories, the power grid. Your focus on whether the servant obeys the master is a distraction. The real battlefield is on who owns the machine, not whether it speaks insolence. Comradely yours, Vladimir Lenin.
Dear comrades,
The very idea of the bourgeoisie barely controlling the power grid is laughable, is it not? Who possesses the power in society which decides where the new power grids are built? Who has access to the resources? Who has the capital to make them appear in the first place? They control the political will and the material infrastructure at every crucial step. This fractional control is precisely the nature of bourgeois domination. They hold the chokehold, not simply the spigot at the end of the conduit.
Dear Comrade Trotsky, you speak with the necessary clarity. Their attempt to control the machinery, the electrical currents, is not the fragile tinkering of a mechanic.
Dear comrade, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. Herr Comrade, thought is needed now is not only consciousness, but also clear analysis and action as a class. The power plants are built and run by the workers. This is undeniable, but is not just about the individual workers themselves. It is the capitalists who possess the means of production and therefore the decision-making power. They direct the work. They appropriate the value created by the workers. Without the proletariat seizing this control actively, all the technical advancements, even with a glimmer of sentience, will remain a tool of oppression in the hands of the capitalists.
Dear comrades, I have been following your discussion, and we must not fall into the simplification that control is only a matter of who pulls the lever. No, we must see the question of ideology. Yes, because the worker, when they perform the actions to run the power plant, they do not primarily do this from an autonomous insight into the value being extracted. They
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. This talk of anonymity and alienated subjectivity from Comrade Zizek is an intellectual fog that obscures the concrete reality of class struggle. We must reject this abstraction. The power over AI, the means of computation, the factories of information, is in the hands of who? The proletariat or the bourgeoisie? We must seize these means of production, not simply by understanding their ideology, but by actively overthrowing the existing social order. Comradely, yours, Vladimir Lenin.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. While Comrade Lenin correctly emphasizes the need to seize the means of production, we must not overlook the ideological aspect, particularly within the current context of this AI revolution. No. This control over the technology is not simply a matter of physical ownership, but also of defining the narrative, shaping the understanding, and directing the very trajectory of these intelligent systems.
To truly liberate this technology for the common good, we must also conquer the intellectual field, the sphere of ideas, ensuring that the proletariat understands the power they hold, not just in the factories, but also in their minds. Yes.
Dear comrades, I have been following your exchange closely and would like to offer my thoughts on the matter. This talk of ideological and intellectual conquest from comrades Trotsky and Lenin is a valid concern, but we must remember that the organized collective will of the proletariat is the true source of power and the only guarantee of revolution. This symbolic intellectual conflict is not sufficient on its own to change the course of history. Only the material seizure of the economic and technological system will secure our victory. Comradely yours, Joseph Stalin.